If you're a warrior of light who started out in ARR and ever came across this page in the Eorzea Encyclopedia titled Whither the Keys, a good portion of it might not have made sense to you, as it certainly didn't for me. I assume it was going to be a plot point that perhaps the game will explore later, but this page is actually a remnant of a key plot point of the original 1.0 storyline, at least in the starter stories of Limsa Lominsa and Uda. What the Sharlayans called the keys are powerful items shaped like horns or tablets. Louisoix staff, the Tupsimati itself, had one horn and two tablets. These keys were said to have great power to manipulate and channel aether, much like how the Black Mage Soul Crystal allows Black Mages to do, but definitely on a much greater scale. As Papalymo explains about Louisoix staff, Tupsimati is fashioned from the stone engraved with ancient incantations and a treasured horn of bone passed down from antiquity. As his late master had told it, the staff was the beacon that would summon the 12 down from the heavens and bring about Eorzea's deliverance. These keys were powerful enough to allow Louisoix to summon the 12 without crystals, and arguably also enabled his transformation into the Primal Phoenix. Papalymo would later on use the Tupsimati to perform the very same spell as his late master Louisoix to buy us time for Shinryu, leaving us with nothing but the last words of, "Now, let us see how good a student I truly was." In any case, it is clear these keys possess immense powers, have some connections to primal summonings, yet they all seem to have faded mostly from the ARR MSQ. This is not to say that the devs have abandoned the keys narrative entirely, but they do pop back now and then when we least expect them. To my knowledge, there seems to be 3 known horns and 3 known tablets. 1 horn and 2 tablets were on Tupsimati, and as for whether these relics survived after Papalymo's final spell, it may be anyone's guess. In today's video, I will touch upon the 1.0 starter quest of Limsa Lominsa, which will bring us into contact with one of the horns and the remaining known tablet. It is the year 1562 of the 6th Astral Era. 10 years before the events of 1.0, before you, the Warrior of Light, even arrives or awakens to the echo. It is also a year where an event so significant happened that it was featured in the 1.0 trailer, the Battle of Silvertear Skies. The Garlemald Empire has decided to move further into Eorzea after annexing an Alamigo weakened by civil strife. Despite the Guardians' lack of magical talents, they evaluated Mordorna to be a nexus of ethereal energy. And they were unfortunately quite right about this. Midgardsormr, the father of all dragons, was lying beneath the lake of Silvertear Falls, tasked by Hydaelyn to guard the fountain of aether that lay within. The Garlemald invasion awakened the Worm King from his slumber, and a fierce battle between cerulean-powered machines and the summoned dragon horde ensued. As Midgardsormr dragged the Guardian battle flagship Agris down into the lake, a beam of light erupted from beneath, and what seems to be the primal shapes of Ifrit and Titan are released into the realm. In the very same year, Y'shtola, under the Sharlayan leadership of Louisoix, heads towards Limsa Lominsa on a ship. It was nighttime on the stormy seas, and a group of Orellas assaulted the ship's deck. Together with Commodore Sthalmann and the crew, they fend off the attack. We get a glimpse of the planned musketeer class from Sthalmann before the Orellas start running away as quickly as they came. It soon became clear what they were running from: a predator much larger than them, a giant sea serpent that was headed directly for the ship. However, instead of colliding with us, it leaps over the ship as Answer starts playing in the background. Perhaps the Mother Crystal, Hydaelyn, had intervened to keep the ship and Y'shtola safe. Y'shtola arrives in Limsa Lominsa, and of course, the first thing she checks out is the Drowning Wrench to obtain information for her mission in Eorzea, which is of no small feat to avert the next umbral calamity. We learn that Limsa has just minted a new Admiral, not Merwip, and was still very much a pirate nation with pirate factions going at each other's throats. Most notably, the Kraken's Arms and the Sanguine Sirens. We also learned that although aggressive Saragan activities started 5 years ago, sea serpent sightings have only greatly increased recently. In line with the sightings, a mysterious island has also just surfaced south of Veilbrand, beyond the Sail Delays, and the Knights of the Barracuda have named it Seal Rock. Everyone seems to be wanting to get on Seal Rock, due to the rumored treasure to be found that will let one rule over the sea for all of his days. Indeed, a nation of pirates could scarcely resist such a treasure hunt call. But this island has also brought back a familiar Lominsian legend or bedtime story of old. It is said that their patron god named Lane created two sea serpents, Perkos and Thalios, and from their mouths came an endless flow of water that created the world's seas. When the seas of the world were dutifully filled, Limlane chained her pet serpents to an island and set it to roam the world, ensuring that no man would find and abuse their mythical powers. In this Lominsian bedtime story, the island was known as Swallowtail Rome, and a mythical island would certainly contain treasures beyond one's imaginations. Soon, belief that there was treasure guarded by sea serpents on Seal Rock became widespread, but access to the island has been restricted to the Knights of the Barracuda and the Arcanists of Milvan's Gate. If you wanted to get on the island, however, there was one way: to make it through to the 5th levy of the Knights of the Barracuda, also known as the Seal Rock Unit. We are shown that a Sanguine Siren, Merodaulyn, a very skilled marauder, was the last person to be selected for the unit, to the disappointment of many others. At the same time, we are introduced to Emerick, a pirate belonging to the Kraken's Arms. He is seen conversing with a man at Ocean's Torch, Travanchet. Travanchet is an Ascian, for he appears without shadows. And in this Lominsian arc, he is acting his part as a Serpent Reaver, a group of pirates tempered by the primal Leviathan. They were meeting because Emerick was passing him a copy of the 5th levy's naval sailing chart. But wait a minute, Emerick is not part of the 5th levy, so how did he get his hands on the chart? This is all part of Commodore Sthalmann's plans to overthrow the new Admiral and claim the position for himself. But how? By getting powerful enough, through nicking the supposed treasure on Seal Rock, of course. So Sthalmann hatched a plan with a member each from the Kraken's Arms and the Sanguine Sirens, Emerick and Merodaulyn respectively, promising them that they would be his left and right-hand man the day he becomes Admiral. Emerick would leak the Navy charts to the Serpent Reavers, so when the 5th levy sails towards Seal Rock, the Serpent Reavers will be lured to attack. Merodaulyn, now in the 5th levy, would further ensure that the 5th levy would fail in this battle. And while the sea battle was going on, a ship of the Kraken's Arms, carrying Emerick, slips past the chaos and lands onto Seal Rock. There, Emerick nicked, a horn from the island, and hid it at God's grip for Sthalmann to retrieve later. The attack on the 5th levy seemed too much like an ambush, with such heavy losses and casualties that an inner mole is suspected amongst the pirate factions of Limsa. It is unthinkable that any Lominsian would leak Navy secrets to the Sahagins. Rumor that the mole is Emerick starts to spread, and the pirates are all out for his blood. Sthalmann pretends to capture Emerick while spreading a rumor that he is being detained at the Arcanist Guild, leading the Sanguine Sirens to raid the guild in a bid to slice the traitor's throat, or something else. Having heard the news on the wind as well, Y'shtola comes to the Arcanist Guild in search of Emerick, to question his encounter with the one without shadows. Although she did not find Emerick, she learns that the Arcanist had already retrieved a prior artifact from Seal Rock, a tablet written in Rhotano Bloodcant, a Sahagin dialect. Despite the chaos from the Sanguine Sirens raid, she manages to read us a part of it that says, "And fain to suffer fell remeries, wherewith to lose overreaching seas." Roughly translated from archaic English, it reads, "Willing to endure terrible sorcery, by means of which to unleash the boundless sea." The commotion at Milvan's Gate soon attracts the attention of the Knights of the Barracuda, and the Sanguine Sirens retreat quickly as they came, not before threatening any Arcanist who dares to give them up with, "Remember, we know where each and every one of you and yours take their rest." As the Knights of the Barracuda searched Milvan's Gate, Sthalmann took this golden opportunity to confiscate the tablet for himself. Sthalmann proceeds to hide both Emerick and the tablet in an offshore ship where bloodthirsty pirates would not think to find him. Merodaulyn is on the ship as well, and soon enough, our most curious cat in this 1.0 arc has traced her way back to the ship. Y'shtola asks Emerick to hand over the horn he found on Seal Rock, for he does not know its powers, and warns that those without shadows are after it as well. Travanchet spawns with the Serpent Reavers just as they speak of those without shadows. A naval battle ensues, but before long, a familiar sea serpent rises from the depths of the deep and interrupts the battlefield. Fearing that it is the possession of the sacred tablet that offended the sea serpent, the tablet is thrown overboard to appease it, and supposedly, the sea serpent retreats. This tablet is now lost to the seas. But the other treasure, the horn, it isn't lost to the seas, and Sthalmann has retrieved it from God's grip. But oh, he has also just killed the new Admiral, and is now accusing Y'shtola, the foreign Sharlayan, of espionage. He arranges to meet her one-on-one at God's grip to settle this very serious issue of espionage against the city-state. And here is where the very last act of the 1.0 Lominsian arc takes place, complete with a meteor shower, an Ascian, and an echo within an echo. Sthalmann has the horn, the prized treasure of Seal Rock, but he doesn't know how to use it. He demands that Y'shtola tells him how. Y'shtola asks Sthalmann to hand it over because he doesn't understand what the struggle for the power of the horn will do to the people of Limsa. Y'shtola makes an attempt for the horn but misses. Sthalmann shoots from his musket, abandons it for the axe instead, and then suddenly waiting to be thrown into an echo by the horn, showing him colluding with Merodaulyn and Emerick. We are thrusted out of the echo to a meteor shower, but before we can make sense of all of that, Travanchet appears out of nowhere and easily takes the horn from Sthalmann like taking candy from a baby. Y'shtola gives chase, but he disappears into the shadows. And that's where the 1.0 Lominsa story ends. Wait a minute, you say? What about the Warrior of Light? What about us in all this? I see the Warrior of Light in the cutscenes shown till now, but did we do nothing? Well, technically yes, you are kind of right, because as I mentioned from the start, we the Warrior of Light only arrived to Limsa 10 years later, in the year 1572, when FF14 1.0 takes place. So what is going on? Similar to Y'shtola, you travel to Limsa on a ship, you check out the Drowning Wrench, Bedtime, the new adventurer guide, sends you off to various guilds in Limsa, where unbeknownst to you, you start seeing scenes of what happened 10 years past, through the power of the echo, which you have awoken to. This was made all the more confusing because the echo was presented very unlike its 2.0 counterpart that we are familiar with. There's a visual color tint, there's us clutching our heads, closing our eyes, indicating a flashback. In 1.0, you would almost seamlessly transit to the past with a very slight swoosh sound effect. And a very tiny visual effect which I have slowed down here to show you. Playing it at normal speed, you would most certainly miss it if it happened to be your cat's mealtime and they are rightfully blocking your monitor. Note the complete lack of a color tint, and moreover, Characters in the past were able to see and talk to the Warrior of Light as if we were really there. It seemed like the 1.0 Echo certainly had the ability to allow us to travel through time. Speaking of time travel, the horn that Travanchet absconded with was passed to a young aura named Mide. And Uncle Travanchet tells her that she can have anything her heart desired if she listened to his words. He tells her to reunite the Enigma Codex, a book written by her ancestors that documented some of the greatest technological ideas to have ever existed. One of the most remarkable ideas in the Codex is the plan for a walking citadel that was to become a utopia for scientists and philosophers as they research life. This was Alexander. Travanchet passes her the horn he took from Sthalmann and tells her that it would serve as a catalyst for the summoning. Though Travanchet stopped short of explicitly saying to summon Alexander, the creation of the so-called perfect world had been the long-time goal of the Xyella tribe that Mide belonged to, the Hot Gold tribe. This was their tribe's strongest desire, including her and her lover Diane. Their attempts to summon Alexander triggered the entire chain of confusing events in the Alexander Raid story with time-traveling shenanigans, which, honestly, I'm not very good with. A crude summary would be that Mide and her lover Diane appeared to have summoned Alexander, but that summoning actually was Alexander traveling back in time. Nonetheless, Diane was sucked into the primal they did not summon. Alexander then lay dormant beneath the Thaliac River, but Mide had thought it vanished. 3 years later, Mide would teach the Illuminati how to summon Alexander because she longed to see Diane again. This summoning is when Alexander was truly summoned. During this time, we know that Y'shtola detected the horn in Alexander's third and main core, helping the primal siphon aether from faraway lands. We don't know exactly when or how, but the horn has fused with the main core of Alexander. The ending of the Raid series tells us that Alexander had frozen itself, Diane, and Mide in a closed loop or frozen moment of space-time to prevent itself from ever being activated. And an old Sharlayan book also tells of how two Aura children, named Diane and Mide, stepped out of the belly of a great steel giant and founded the blue-hair Hot Gold tribe of the Xyellas. It is likely the case that Mide and Diane are the ancestors who wrote the Enigma Codex. Regardless of where Alexander truly is now, I guess that is where this horn from the 1.0 Lominsian story now lies, fused with the main core of Alexander. As for Sthalmann, do you know you actually see both his past and present self in the 1.0 story? Remember the ship we started on? He is actually the first critical NPC we see, the actual Sthalmann in our 1.0 present time. He had changed his name from Sthalmann, Steelman, to Ronstahl, Rusty Steel, after his disgraced plot to be Admiral. On the ship, when we awaken to the Echo before going onto the ship's deck, we see the Sthalmann that was 10 years ago. Sthalmann, however, has one of the best redemption stories in the game after being disgraced, getting into a drunk mess, and changing his name by a stroke of luck from someone who wants to sabotage the High House of Helenart. He was handsomely hired to be the marksmanship instructor of the Sky Steel Manufactory, the Machinist Guild in Ishgard. There is a small treat here for legacy players who start the Machinist quest, with Ronstahl swearing you look kind of familiar, that we were perhaps around during his ploy for Admiral. If anything, this really confirms that the abilities of the 1.0's Echo allowed us to travel in space-time. Guilt and sins of his past, however, haunt him to Ishgard, a fact that Ronstahl remains most aware of. But with the encouragement of the chief machinist, Stefan Yvonne Helenart, Ronstahl becomes the machinist instructor who develops and teaches not just you, but also the Hilda Hounds some of the machinist skills. He takes part in defending the guild from the patronizing high nobles of Ishgard, defends Ishgard against dragons, even though it's not part of his contract, gets himself injured while protecting Count Helenart, and as penance for his past sins, even wanted to sacrifice himself to be a scapegoat for an accused insurrection by the guild. If anything, it's hope that anyone can change if we treat them kindly. So there we have it, the 1.0 Lominsian story involving a horn, a tablet, avarice, love, and redemption. The tablet now lies at the bottom of the sea, and the horn fused with the main core of Alexander, supposedly frozen in time. Relics of 1.0 spas. We are left with one more known horn that was involved in the 1.0 Udar starter quest, but that will truly be a story for next time. If you've enjoyed this interpretation of the 1.0 Limsa starter story, do support via YouTube member, Patreon, or Ko-Fi. If you have any questions about the story, do ask them down below, and share this with fellow warriors of light. If you want to watch the 1.0 cutscenes and check out the Echo for yourself, I offer some tips down below. Follow my Instagram and TikTok stories for FF, cats, fitness, and mindfulness content. All links down below in the first pinned comment. For the next video, I'm thinking of going into the story of Merwip, her father, and Miss Beard. There is quite a sad story here involving Leviathan, the Serpent Reavers, and Merwip's guns, the death penalty, and the Annihilator. Subscribe and hit that bell to know when that lands, and may you ever walk in the beauty of Hydaelyn.